Is from the letter to the Philippians, chapter 2, verses 5 through 11. I will be reading from the New International Version. Philippians 2, 5 through 11. Your attitude should be the same as that of Jesus Christ, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. Therefore God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father.
Is it me? I'm thankful for Eden's practice of inviting the preacher to think through the words in advance. And I know that every time I come up here, my words are slightly different than they were on the page. So please expect nothing less this morning. But if you have read my sermon, I will be touching on those themes. I've had the privilege of being part of this play, A Goodly Heritage. And I've been so delighted and surprised by some of the unexpected ways I've enjoyed the work and some of the unexpected delights of the play. And I'm easily amused. But one of the things, that is no diss to the play. But one of the things that has delighted me is how long black socks can change ordinary men's dress pants, dockers, into 16th century breeches. I never knew this could happen. It makes me want to go home and try it. You should try it just to see the change. I am so captivated by the ways this play has invited me, and I think invites others, into living in, imagining different times in the past history of this community's story, and incidentally, some of my own story. By learning about the different places the Swiss Volhynians migrated, I realized I was led to research part of my family history, and one side of my family moved to the Palatinate with other Schweitzers who were experiencing lots of persecution in Switzerland. My grandpa's side, or my grandpa's mother, moved to a little village in the Palatinate, and there they stayed. In fact, some of them, as recently as the early 90s, when I was there spending Christmas and Easter with them, some of them were still there. My great-great-great-grandfather moved from that little village in the Palatinate to Iowa. So thanks to Jenny's reflections on this community, the Swiss Volhynian history, I have learned a little bit about my own, and what fun. Well, so socks make pants into breeches, and plays are about getting into character. And when we play with children, in my opinion, some of the best moments are when we as adults can humble ourselves, let go of a little bit of dignity, and play a character alongside. Or when we have the privilege of watching our children play pretend and assuming characters, even wearing dress-up clothes to help feel the part. Jesus knows about getting into character, doesn't he? When he tells his disciples in this story from Mark, go do this, find this donkey, it'll be untied, and do this and get ready. I think Jesus is practicing this wonderful art of getting into character so that the people whose dignity has been insulted a lot of times and who probably are, as adults, live into some fairly prescribed roles, fisherman, homemaker, for lack of a better term, tax collector, physician. Think of what you think of as New Testament roles. So, and pretty strictly male and female roles in Jesus' day. So Jesus is inviting these people who have had their indignity or their dignity insulted in many ways, just as Jews living under the Roman occupation. They have to do all of these things whether they want to or not. Jesus knows this, and Jesus knows that, for all I know, maybe I think it's safe to assume children's play looked different 2,000 years ago. There were no mass-produced toys. There was less leisure time, and presumably children did play. Jesus is capturing people's ability to play in this opportunity he gives the crowd to be part of his entrance into Jerusalem. I would like to now ask that this slide be shown. The artist who created this picture has given permission. He has a really neat website called the Cartoon Bible Network. And for some reason, he didn't share this picture on there as a lone picture, but his name is Steve Thomason, and via email, he gave me permission to use this image. This is one he created a year ago for Palm Sunday, and you have exactly what Brittany kind of described. We have maybe not a chariot, but this is a depiction of Pontius Pilate, who also would have made a grander entrance into Jerusalem that same week that Jesus makes his more playful entry on a donkey into one of the gates of Jerusalem. Here we have Pontius Pilate, Roman leader, making his entrance. And you can just really see the contrast. You see the jubilance, the playfulness of the people's faces following Jesus on that donkey that he seems to be riding pretty successfully. And then you have the prowess, the might, the spears, the authoritarian kind of vibe of the Roman Pontius Pilate entering. Okay, thank you for showing the slide. There is a link to that picture in the emailed version of the sermon if you want to go back to it. So here Jesus is not playing the part of the Roman strongman. And you know this, and I'm sure you've heard this before. He is not the strong leader on the pedestal. He is relying on an authority that comes from within, that he has been inviting the people who love and know him all this time before he enters Jerusalem. He's relying on that loving authority to invite them into play and into processional. And I can't attempt to say that I know all the emotions going through people who were following Jesus that day. I'm sure it was a profound and powerful experience as well as a playful and joyful one. But Jesus is taking a visible role. He's getting into character here And he will then later, again, as he gathers with his disciples in an upper room to wash their feet. Jesus is getting into character and showing himself to be the type of leader that we just heard about in Philippians chapter 2. This person who empties himself, who even though he has all the authority of God, says, later in the week, he'll say that to his disciples, I'm sharing this with you. I've been made great by God, but that's not how I want to use my power. I want to use my power to invite people to follow me. I want to use my power to start a movement. By being a leader who humbles himself, Jesus is inviting others to humble themselves and be followers. So I just have two thoughts to kind of end this reflection. The first one is that over the past couple years, I've gotten really interested in a Serbian political theorist whose name is Srđa Popović. And he was a rock band performer, bass player in Serbia in 1992. He had a band. He was a university student, but he didn't study, and he really just enjoyed playing. And with his musician friends, he and other Serbians were living through the reign of Slobodan Milosevic and the ethnic cleansing in Serbia. And they did not, Popović and his friends did not like this, nor did others. And Srđa Popović and 10 of his friends started to create a movement in town. They would gather people to bang on pots and pans. They would play music. They would tell jokes. And what began as a group of 11 people grew to a movement of 70,000. I don't know why I hadn't heard about this until about 3-4 years ago, 5 years ago. But that movement became what he called a blueprint for a revolution. I'm not here to say what kind of revolution people should be involved in, and I think it's really important to think about the Jesus we follow, somebody who knows how to get into character, and for all his seriousness, who also knows how to play a role, how to invite people to playfully join in. As serious as things feel in the world today, and as Derek pointed out, also 100 years ago, I'm also not here to say that I have any solutions, and I know as followers of Jesus who try to get into Jesus' character and follow in Jesus' example and look to the early Anabaptists and other ancestors for how they may have shown us ways of following Jesus that sometimes we lose sight of or forget or might want to take up again. As we think about those things, I find an abiding hope in this story of Palm Sunday and in this parade that Jesus allows himself to be part of. Is it a solution to all the suffering of the world? Maybe not, and maybe also yes, because we can have this mind among us that is ours in Christ, who though he was in the form of God, he emptied himself, taking the form of a servant. That is ours to think about again and again and again. And so I close with a story of my sister. We lived next door to my very somber Swiss Mennonite grandpa, and my cousins used to call him and his brothers the somber brothers. They wore their black hats to church. They entered through what had once been the men's side of the sanctuary. They sat in a row, and they looked like this all through the service. They never sang. They wore dark colors. My grandpa Baumgartner was one of the most serious, solemn, somber men I knew. And I'm the oldest of 4 daughters. My youngest sister had a little difficulty walking as a toddler, and my grandpa, my somber, stoic grandpa, he was old by then. He was born in 1898, and he just took a real shine to Barbara, and so he would help her practice walking. And he often came into our living room, and he would just sit down. He'd kind of go, and just sit there. But he'd stay for hours, and he didn't move much. One time he used permanent marker to draw a face on one of our stuffed animals, and my sisters and I were so mad that he did that. But he just sat there, and he kind of got a kick out of just amusing himself and watching us play. He would let my sister Barbara climb all over him, and we had a big box of dress-up clothes, and Barbara would go grab a hat, and she'd put it on somber grandpa, and he'd just sit there and take it. And then she'd grab a scarf, and she'd wrap it around his neck, and he'd just sit there and take it. And then she'd find a shawl or a jacket or some nonsense or a dress, and she'd lay it over him, and he'd just sit there and let her dress him. Grandpa helped Barbara gain all this balance and all of these things that were necessary to becoming a strong walker. He did it patiently by playing the character of whoever she made him to be. He sat there, and I know that he secretly enjoyed it, because by the time Barbara was 5 or 6, we were all giving my grandpa hugs when he had never taken them from us before. So it wasn't until I was about 12 that I was hugging him. Let's get into character together. Let's play the part Jesus invites us to. Let's play the parts Jesus invites us to as we live as Jesus followers moving into this Holy Week.